Well, in a year unlike any other, President Trump says he's going to do something unlike any other president running for re-election. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, the president tweeted recently that he has narrowed down the place where he is going to accept the nomination of the Republican Party to run for re-election on August 27th. That's the date, the final night of the convention. It's either going to be the White House or, as he says, the Great Battlefield at Gettysburg. Bill, just in general, what do you think of those two potential locations for accepting his party's nomination?
I guess that means he's not going to be doing it during the convention.
Yeah, I don't think
that's traditionally what the...
Yeah, there's not going to be the big 50,000 people in an arena kind of setting like they've had in the past.
Right, of course. I just completely slipped my mind, honestly. I think the White House would be more appropriate. Gettysburg has been sanctified by the people that fought there, and I don't think anybody's likely to improve on Lincoln. So I think he'd probably be better off in the White House for this one.
Now, two things. Let me deal with Gettysburg first, because that kind of came out of left field for me anyway, because I had heard for a little while now, a couple of weeks, that the president was considering doing it at the White House, and there's been some controversy about that. But it strikes me that in the middle of one of the most politically divisive times in the nation's history, to go to Gettysburg, a key site, if not the key site of the Civil War, a war in which this country was literally tearing itself apart, you could take that symbolism a couple of ways, couldn't you?
Well, you could. And depending on how he decides to play it, you could basically make the case that the Union didn't win the war at Gettysburg, but if the South had won at Gettysburg, they might have been able to bring Britain in, and that might have done it. So obviously, as a big turning point, you could use Gettysburg for the launching pad to basically say that this is where Republican Union forces with a Republican president fought the Confederacy, which was the Democratic Party having left the Union. Wouldn't be bad to make that point every now and then in a way that couldn't be spun or anything. But at the same time, I think that's a little dangerous. And I not just politically dangerous, I don't know. I think it'd be a mistake to do it at Gettysburg. There are some things that really should remain above politics. And the second this comes out of my mouth, I realize that we're in the middle of a period where all of our statues are being torn down, our entire culture's being torn down, our history's being rewritten on a daily basis. And Donald Trump is the head of the team that's fighting to preserve those things. So maybe on second thought, it would be more appropriate for him to do it there.
Yeah, I think you could look at it a couple of ways. One is you could use he said specifically the Great Battlefield at Gettysburg. So in terms of a battlefield, you're looking at a site where some of the most vicious fighting of the Civil War occurred between two opposing sides within one allegedly country, although at that time, some of them didn't think they were within one country. So that's one way of looking at it. Wow, go to the point of maximum division. The other way of looking at it is saying, well, I'm going to the place where Abraham Lincoln gave this classic speech that in a way binds together all Americans. And in his very brief speech there at Gettysburg, he managed to avoid divisive language. Lincoln did. If you want to bring a country together, maybe that's the way to do it.
If that's the approach he takes, and I think that is absolutely the approach to take personally, then he's got a real opportunity if you look at it that way. I just naturally, reflexively went to, this ongoing political dogfight that's just been consuming this country. That would be quite a coup. To say that the Gettysburg Address was brief, there's a photograph of Lincoln at the Gettysburg Address, the only one known of him. And he is stepping down from the podium because he had gotten up there just a minute or two earlier, and the photographer was sure that he'd have plenty of time to set up. The guy before him, I want to say was Ernest Everest or something. Spoke for 3 hours. 3 hours. But in any event, if it's short and sweet and succinct and positive, then Gettysburg, I think, could give him a boost.
Just the fact that Lincoln would say something like, "The brave men living and dead who struggled here." He didn't say, this is the place where the Union soldiers licked the Confederates,
Precisely correct. Of the people, by the people, for the people is an important concept that we could really use today. And I think, having had all of 5-6 minutes now to reflect on it, it would be putting down a marker, and I think a good marker, an important marker, in fact, an essential marker that basically says, look, this is our history, and we know what it is, and we know there's stains on history like everybody else's history, but it's also a magnificent history. And I am standing on this historic spot to say that although I didn't ask for this position, I am now the defender of the history of this nation, and we are not going to simply allow it to be stolen, twisted, knocked down, set on fire by a bunch of radical communists who are attending Yale on $170,000 a year scholarship, that kind of thing. If he makes his acceptance speech about, obviously 2016 was "Let's Make America Great Again," but you could almost make the case that you could do something like, oh, and by the way, here's why America's great. They had a rally at the White House that the Democrats did, or Young Socialists, or not much of a difference anymore, really. But basically, these young kids were chanting, "America was never great." Okay, let's make it about that. I think that's what he's going to do. I think that's what he should do, because I think that's what this election is about. It's just that. Is this a good place, yes or no? The Democrats are running as far to the left as they can on how it's just nothing but murdering of minorities and police as Nazis, and it's ruled by an orange dictator, and science is being, ridden out of town on a rail, and it's the worst place in the world, and it needs fundamental changing. And that's their vision, and I think they ought to run on it, and it looks like they're going to. If you're going to oppose that vision, the more I think about it, the better Gettysburg appears to be a choice for the reasons you mentioned as well, for the kind of the unifying aspect of it. If he can hit that tone, he's not going to hit Lincoln's tone. No one's going to match those words. Shakespeare couldn't match those words, so he couldn't exceed them anyway, let's put it that way. But if he goes there with that kind of tone, it could be a transformational kind of a thing for the country and for the campaign. If Donald Trump can come out trying to as a uniter, and we've heard speeches that he's given that were really quite good in this regard. I think that's the strategy to go for. And then if they decide to keep throwing the mud at him, we'll see how long he can stay above it. But it's an interesting choice. I tell you one thing, Scott, what it is it's a bold choice. And it's good to see that he's going with the bold choice, because usually the team that is winning plays, protect the football. And that's how you end up losing in the fourth quarter.
Well, in his tweet on this subject, he said his decision is coming very soon, with a big exclamation point afterward. For the final question, let's visit this idea of doing this political act of accepting one party's nomination in what has become known essentially as the People's House. It's the White House. It's where, it belongs to all Americans. And the critique of the suggestion that President Trump would accept the nomination there obviously has been that this is not something for all Americans. This is just for your party. The president has argued that this is the least expensive, least complicated way of doing this because the security doesn't have to set up in a distant location. There's no travel expenses involved. Everything's already right there. A very practical kind of businessman way of looking at it, like, hey, why don't you put a camera on a tripod and we'll take care of it right here. Do you think that that kind of approach is going to win him any votes that he doesn't already have among independents or conservative Democrats?
We, like, as people should know by now, I never get the questions before I hear them on the show. And every minute that goes by, Gettysburg feels stronger and stronger to me. As far as the criticism that this is the people's house and it shouldn't be politicized, let me just say I have clear memory of the White House being lit up in the spectrum of colors when some Gay Rights Act passed. And that wasn't exactly
but that was for all of America's gay people, regardless of political affiliation.
It was not keeping politics out of the White House is what it wasn't. And I don't particularly buy that argument. Every time I mean, what's the president going to do? The president lives in the White House. That's where his office is. To say that this shouldn't be tainted by politics is just kind of ridiculous. How many press conferences are given in the White House Rose Garden or on the way out to the helicopter or in the Oval Office? Of course it's political. It belongs to the party that elects the president.
Well, the media has been very harsh on President Trump for that, just what you mentioned there, his tendency to stand in front of Marine One or stand in the Rose Garden in that kind of setting and launch into very particular diatribes about Joe Biden's weaknesses and essentially do something that you might do out on the stump or you might do in the arena at a GOP convention, but it seemed out of place in the White House, at least to some.
Well, those people can pound sand as far as I'm concerned. The people that are accusing Donald Trump of framing the frame, I'm going to put myself in the frame with the Marine One in the background with the rotors spinning ready to go. Are masters of setting the frame. They're masters of putting Donald Trump inside of a frame that is unflattering or just plain false. And so I think the reason that they are most opposed to Donald Trump doing things like framing himself with the trappings of the President of the United States of America, I think it bothers them because they can't control it. They understand the power of it. And that, I think really when you get right down to it, Scott, the reason they don't like it is because making political statements from the White House is something that Democrats do.
I know I said that was the final question, but it occurs to me this year that since we can't do this massive show with their very staged, rallies and chants and applause at particular times. I was down on the floor at a convention a number of years ago, and they're literally like these little worker bees that run around and they go, in 5 minutes, we're going to start chanting, "We love Trump." It's that kind of thing. Will the lack of that kind of pomp and ceremony and enthusiasm in a mass setting have any impact at all on the number of people who get to hear this message, who might have, tuned in for such a show, but really are not as interested in a guy just, essentially doing a Zoom meeting?
Well, the number of people in the actual convention center as opposed to the TV audience is microscopic. So the fact that the room's not going to be full of people is not going to have any impact. But you really bring up an interesting point. It's going to feel pretty flat. Now, that's a sword that cuts both ways. It'll feel flat for both parties, but I think that actually is to Biden's advantage. I think that the Republican, if both conventions were fully attended, I think the Republican convention would have a lot more energy and a lot more excitement than the Democratic one. So I think that actually is an advantage for Biden. Anything that keeps things low key and out of the spotlight helps Joe Biden, I think. So even if you take the politics of it aside, I hadn't really given it any thought until you mentioned it. But it's going to feel like going to Disney World by yourself, It's just going to feel like, okay, everything's here.
You mean not just alone in the car, but alone in the park? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, congratulations, you have the run of the place. Yeah, don't have to wait in line. Nope, you're all alone. And then if you think about going to Disneyland or Disney World all alone and having the entire park to yourself, there's something monumentally depressing about that. And I get the feeling that this year, which is obviously another very, very important year, is going to miss it. I remember when we covered the launch of the Demo 2 mission for SpaceX, and when the thing cleared the pad, I thought, where's the roar? Where's that roar, screaming crowd at the top of their lungs? Oh, I remember now. This is in California, in Hawthorne. They're not allowed out, and that's why there's nobody there. And say what you will about things like laugh tracks and applause tracks. The reason that the television shows put in laugh tracks and applause tracks is because they work. They are social cues that we're used to experiencing. And if they're not there, people have often said, oh, if you didn't put in an applause track, nobody would applaud. If you didn't put in a laugh track, nobody would laugh. And that's probably true. But they make the assumption that it's the applause track that causes the applause or the laugh track that causes the laugh. That's not it. When we're in a group of people, when we hear something we like, we applaud. When we hear something funny, we laugh. And if we don't get those signals coming back from us, then we think something is wrong. So I think the conventions are going to be very different this year. And this year can't end soon enough for me, honestly. It's just please, just go away, 2020.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're grateful to you for watching this program. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to hit that little Liberty Bell button and the subscribe button so you don't miss a single one of the publicly available videos. But there's more than meets the eye on YouTube, and the members at BillWhittle.com enjoy additional backstage content, plus content that they produce themselves, which sometimes I'm kind of embarrassed to say outshines mine. So this is a great group of people. Liberty lovers, constitutional conservatives, and people who get together to think about and talk about some of the most important issues of the day, and frankly, to have a lot of fun as well. If you don't really have a place where you feel like you can hang out and not have to walk on eggshells, maybe it's time you became a member at BillWhittle.com. You just click that big green Become a Member button. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.